My name is Carol Saivetz, and I'm a visiting scholar at the Center for International Studies and a researcher in the Security Studies program at MIT. And with me is Mr. Bakyt Beshimov, who is a former Kyrgyz opposition leader, former member of the Kyrgyz parliament, and former Kyrgyz ambassador to India, who is also a researcher here at the Center for International Studies at MIT. And we'd like to discuss the security implications of the recent events and the fighting in Osh and the political circumstances in Kyrgyzstan. I think the first thing that we should talk about is the actual fighting between the Kyrgyz and the Uzbek, and if you could give us some kind of a context for that and discuss why it's suddenly so important and why it's happening now.
Today in media, it's dominating two opinions. First, that it is inter-ethnic clash between the Kyrgyz and Uzbeks, and second point that it is the continuation of the situation which created after coup in Kyrgyzstan in April 7. First of all, I would like to highlight that what is going on in Kyrgyzstan and what's happened, it is not only inter-ethnic clash between the two ethnic groups in Kyrgyzstan, majority Kyrgyz and minority Uzbek. Not. It is specially provoked to this is inter-ethnic clash by external forces, and it's important to tell more about these external forces. And secondly, their intention of these external forces was not just to provoke the mass killings and the collision between two ethnic groups, but to collide two states in Fergana Valley, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, and to open the war between them. And after that, I would like to tell that to accept what is going on in Kyrgyzstan as internal issue of Kyrgyzstan, it will be wrong, because it is about the regional security. It is the threat to the regional and international security.
Well, it seems to me that it would be helpful to discuss the Fergana Valley, the fact that it's the border of 3 of the Central Asian states. There are mixed ethnic populations in all these areas, and this is not the first time that there's been trouble between the Kyrgyz and the Uzbeks there. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
You are right. Fergana Valley is a densely populated area, not only in Central Asia, but in the world. And Fergana Valley has huge potential for dangerous conflicts. And Fergana Valley is shared by 3 states in Central Asia, by Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. And unfortunately, the conditions for different kinds of conflicts exist. It is the tension over the border issues, tension on a water allocation, energy supply, and unfortunately all these states which sharing the borders, they are not thinking about integration in order to resolve all this tension and to find the good solution which will be in the benefits of all the states. Today we can see tension between all of them. And of course it is contributing to the conflicts in Fergana Valley, but this time it was created intentionally in order to undermine the stability in Fergana Valley and to create the problems not only for Kyrgyzstan, but all Central Asia, and to undermine the successful operation of the United States and NATO in Afghanistan.
When we were chatting before, you mentioned the presence of Islamist forces in the Fergana Valley, and that was part of the sign, you thought, of outside powers interfering in the region. Could you, elaborate on that a little bit?
Many experts, and especially the International Crisis Group, in their reports highlighted that the potential for radicalization of Islam in a Fergana Valley is very high, and it's true. And for instance, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Fergana Valley became the base for Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, for different kind of radical terrorist and extremist organizations, Hizbut and Tahrir. And during the last 10 years, they just strengthened their presence, and therefore this kind of conflicts, it is in the best interest of this terrorist organization.
Who would benefit from this destabilization? I mean, you keep alluding to outside forces. Is it the ethnic Tajiks and Uzbeks coming over the border from Afghanistan? Is there a Russian hand behind this? Is it an attempt to evict the United States from the Manas air base? I think that we need to sort of separate out some of these issues and just to try to get us, a complete and accurate picture.
It's important to understand that in April 7 in Kyrgyzstan, coup was masterminded and prearranged by Russia. A lot of evidence and facts about that. And this is situation in Fergana Valley. It is the continuation of this turmoil organized by Russia. Secondly, can say that who can benefit it from that? It's of course terrorist and extremist organization, and of course it is the implementation of geopolitical ambitions of certain political forces in Kremlin. That's important to stress.
Okay. Well, let's go back and look at the events of April 7th. I agree with you that there seems to be a Russian hand behind the coup, and as you and I have discussed previously, there were really multiple forces that were involved in pushing Mr. Bakyt from power. There were some more liberal Democrats as well as those who were operating at the behest of Russia. And yet it seems that Russia has been very reluctant to lend a hand to this interim government, which they may have indeed put into power. And why? How would you explain Russian reluctance?
It is just tactical games of Russia today, because in order to realize their geopolitical ambition to set up a total control over Central Asia, in order to control all the natural resources, Russia would like to bring to power in Central Asia loyal governments, loyal leaders. Why Russia is so hesitant to be involved? First, after the discussion, they decided to get approval of the Security Council of UN. It was the right step, but it means that Russia would like to get approval, at least of members of Security Council as the United States and China. Getting approval, it means that both states should recognize the dominating role of Russia in Central Asia. This is the tactics of certain circles in Kremlin.
I think we should explain that the CSTO is this collective security treaty organization that is composed of the states in the region and a few of the former Soviet states that are outside of the region, and that they have just begun trying to put together a rapid deployment force that is to be designed, that is to be used in the case of external threats to the region. In other words, if the Taliban or somebody like that were to come across the border from Afghanistan, it's not designed for use in the internal politics of any of the member countries. And in my own estimation, I think that the CSTO has been reluctant to act because I don't think any of the other member states really wants to give the okay to basically Russia, because Russia and Kazakhstan are providing most of the forces for the rapid deployment for those forces to be deployed if there should be trouble in Uzbekistan or in Tajikistan. So it's one thing to say, yes, we need to control the violence. We don't want it to spill across the borders. Yes, we're concerned. On the other hand, it's a very slippery slope for each of them to take, because it would then give the okay to Russian and or Kazakh troops, I guess, to be deployed in their countries. So far, nobody has been willing to provide any troops, even though the interim government, at least as of yesterday, had asked for help, for military help. Today I read just before we started to do this, that Rosa Otunbayeva had withdrawn her request for international military support. So maybe that's a moot issue, at least this round. What are your feelings on this?
First of all, it is in the best interest of Russia to the successful completion of operation of the United States and NATO in Afghanistan, because it is threat to Russian security too. But and the air base Manas or transit center, which we name today, it is the important supply chain for operation in Afghanistan. But intention of Russia, it is just to control entire Central Asia, and it means try to give the strong signals not to Kyrgyzstan but to Uzbekistan and to Kazakhstan, because both states, they are obstacles of the neo-imperialistic policy of certain politicians in Kremlin.
But it obviously has, as you've already mentioned, serious implications for the U.S. and NATO war effort in Afghanistan. And it's not only Manas, it's if the region becomes destabilized and even alternative supply routes into Afghanistan are compromised as well. I mean, there are Germans in Uzbekistan. We have a very small operation in Tajikistan. If fighting were to break out among the three, or first between Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, etc., it compromises a lot more of what we're doing than just the closure of Manas itself. And I agree with you that Russia has dual and competing aspirations. The first is that I think that they're very happy that we're fighting the battles that they couldn't fight in Afghanistan, and they've said they will help the U.S.-NATO effort short of sending troops themselves into Afghanistan. That will never happen again, they have stated. And it's to their interest because they fear that Islamism spreading from Afghanistan could destabilize, as I guess in some respects we're seeing, the Central Asian states and then spread into the Muslim republics and territories within the Russian Federation itself. And it's a big problem for Moscow. On the other hand, if you look at the new national security doctrine, if you look at the new military doctrine, the primary danger, and that's their word, danger, that they see to the Russian Federation is NATO expansion. And as a former Russian general said to me, they're afraid that the United States or NATO is surrounding them, and I quote, with small bases, namely Manas. Manas is not a place to launch a major military operation or a NATO operation against Russia. And I would argue that their short-term goal is to get rid of the United States presence in Manas, and that actually sacrifices their longer-term goal, which is the stability of Central Asia and Afghanistan.